I'm Gary Null, and this is the Progressive Commentary Hour. Continuing with our series of conversations with remarkable minds, we're going to examine the status of the U.S. economies. That's plural. My guest today is Professor Michael Hudson. Michael Hudson is one of our nation's finest, most honest, and insightful economists. He is also a Wall Street financial analyst. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts recently called him the world's best economist. He's currently the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends and was the chief economic policy advisor for Representative Dennis Kucinich's presidential campaign. He has also worked for the White House, the State Department, the Defense Department as an advisor, and also through the Hudson Institute, in addition to the United Nations Institute, where he became a specialist in global economics. He has written many books and important papers and articles. His most recent is Killing the Host: How Financial Parasites and the Debt Bondage Destroy the Global Economy, which goes into great depth in explaining how the polarization of the 1% versus the 99% emerged. His website is michael-hudson.com. Nice to have you with us today.
Good to be back, Gary.
Michael, I'm going to raise several points that I consider important at this particular time with our new president, but also in this analysis that I'm going to ask you to do, I would like for you to share insights that this is not a new phenomena we're facing. This has been around for probably 36 years or longer, but now we're starting to see how it's all impacting us. So here are the areas I would like for you to address, please. First, we are told that we had, at the end of Obama's administration, just at 5% or a little under of unemployment. And yet, when I study the figures, I'm looking at 22% as the minimum. And in some groups, like African Americans who have graduated from college but not yet in the workplace, it's upwards of 50%. And I'm looking at 96 million Americans who had worked full-time at one time, but now don't work at all, have stopped looking for work, or only work part-time, and yet they are not being factored into the honest unemployment level. And I'd like to know what, in your opinion, is the honest unemployment level, and what would happen if we had to be honest about it. So that's one area I'd like for you to address. Separately, we keep talking about the economy as if there's one fixed economy, and that is our anchor upon which all economic policy is made. And yet I find that if you are a working class person, or you're part-time or a student, if you're a single parent, if you're a person who, let's say, does not have a lot of savings, and the 50% of Americans don't have $1,000 to their name in savings. They can't go without being working, or they couldn't support any of their lifestyle. And yet, we're not looking at their plight. I saw some statistics that we have over 2.5 million Americans earning $2 a day or less. Who would have thought that was possible? 16.8 million hungry children. They're food insecure. 2.4 million children who don't have a home. They're literally homeless. 7 million Americans who lost their home. 7 million homes that were lost. That's 28 million Americans, yet no one talks about them at all. You see no articles about them because they managed to find some place to live with a relative or someplace that they're not in a shelter, as if we have, as long as we only count people in shelters, that's the only homeless we have, and yet that's not a real figure. And then what really bothers me is the latest figures that were not shared anywhere. I looked over the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Fortune, Forbes, all your business magazines. I could not find this, except you are familiar with these figures, the real amount of money that the American people backed but were unaware of, that the major corporations got to bail them out after the 2007-8 crash. And the latest figure I have is $29.6 trillion. And then it's broken down, including $8 trillion that went to the European Central Bank, and then the amount that went to each of the American institutes. And yet we didn't bail out a single small business. We didn't bail out a single homeowner. We didn't stop home foreclosures. And yet the President of the United States, had he taken a message to the American people and used the media like a bully pulpit or an FDR fireside chat, we could have gotten a moratorium on home foreclosures. We could have stopped predatory interest rates. None of that was done by Obama, nor Clinton, when Clinton had power to make her voice heard. And of course, it didn't happen under George Bush. So would you just give us your overview in each of these areas? What's really going on with the average person? What's going on in their economy? Why the big banks continue to be able to create any amount of profit or debt that they want, and how that impacts the rest of us, and why we're not honest about the amount of money that we've given to these people who actually contributed to the crisis that we're in. The forum is yours.
Well, Gary, hardly by surprise, the figures you're talking about are figures that the Obama administration is embarrassed about and wants to avoid. You've cited the very widespread figure of 22% unemployment, old style, in the sense that you're talking about people who don't have the kind of jobs that people think of as being fully employed, a full-time job with pensions or certainly with medical care. The government counts as employed everybody who's looking for work. So if you're living in a town in the Rust Belt or flyover America, you're not looking for work anymore, and so you're not even counted in the figures. So that's one thing that the government doesn't count. Also, most of the new jobs are all minimum wage jobs, and the new employers in the last 8 years, in order to avoid having to pay medical care and other medical insurance, in order to avoid paying overtime and to avoid giving holidays, they employ people part-time. And the part-time is really a downgrading for employment. It's not the kind of employment that people really expect. So they've got the reported figure of unemployment, way down, but it's not really. That's what they used to call underemployment. In other words, full employment would be if these part-time people were employed full-time. Full employment would be if they were employed at normal jobs where they get a vacation part of each year and where the companies pay for their medical insurance. That's not the kind of employment that's created today, so the employment statistics are very largely fake employment. You could say the same thing about the economy. When people talk about the economy going up in the newspapers, the New York Times and the Washington Post, and basically they talked about gross domestic product. All of the increase in gross domestic product in the last 8 years during Obama's entire administration, all of the increase has only gone to 5% of the population. And that entire increase has only gone to the fire sector. That is, it's gone to Wall Street, it's gone to finance, health insurance, the insurance industry, and real estate. So if you're not in finance, insurance, and real estate, at the very top of the 5% of the population, then you've actually gone down. So basically, there should be GDP for the 50%, GDP for the 90%, GDP for the 95%, and GDP for the 5%. And in that point, you'd see just about everybody going down and down and down, and only the Wall Street wealthy going up. But that's not how they do the GDP. And as a matter of fact, the other night, I had dinner with someone who's just works for the United Nations, who's just re-put together the GDP numbers to describe how economies work. And he finds that to do the real economic output, you should subtract Wall Street. You should subtract the fire sector because that doesn't really produce output. It's exploitation. In other words, if the insurance industry decides to charge health people more, if the banks decide to charge people more, all of that is counted as increasing output, and it doesn't increase output at all. It just takes from one pocket, the 95%, and puts it in the other pocket, the 5%. So these transfer payments shouldn't even be included in GDP, but they are in order to make it look good. Finally, you mention the bailout. Well, just look at what President Trump has done in the last 11 days, how much he's done. Obama had exactly the same advantage when the Democrats won in 2008. You had then one party controlling not only the presidency, but the House and the Senate. And that's because people wanted change. But Obama's position was, his role was to prevent change. His role was to prevent hope. He'd promised to that victims of junk mortgage lending would be bailed out. And instead, as soon as he got in, he said he changed his mind. He double-crossed the voters. And he did give a net altogether about $4.3 trillion to Wall Street, which is still unpaid. You mentioned $27 trillion. That was the gross amount. The government continued to make loans to U.S. banks and to foreign banks of about $23 trillion over the current balance of $4 trillion, but the $23 billion's been paid back. The government essentially gave this money to Wall Street to gamble, to make money including by evicting people from their homes and taking them over, giving them money to play with. And now the banks and Wall Street have made enough money off this gross $27 trillion to be in a position of power to. They made a very good investment. They invested it in buying the government. The government was privatized and sold to Wall Street, and that basically the Wall Street people said, well, we've got to scuttle the election. The role of the Democrats is to move further and further right to make the Republicans look as the lesser evil. So Americans, no matter how much you may disagree with what President Trump has been doing for the last 11 days, much of it absolutely horrible, the fact is he was the lesser evil in the minds of most people. And most people thought, well, it's true that he's scuttling he's fighting against regulatory rights against women, but at least he's not going to war with Russia. At least he's not, so far, in the hands of Wall Street, and that's why he was elected, because bad as he is, he's not as bad as the alternative, and that tells you something about where the American political system's at.
I appreciate those insights, Michael. And it is true, if Hillary Clinton had been elected, NATO would be posturing in Poland, at the Russian border, all the saber rattlers, all the war hawks in Washington, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and the Kagan family, all would be trying to use the media, which it has substantial influence over, to posture that Russia is the problem. And then there's a high probability there could be a new Cold War. Whether it becomes a hot war or cold war, it would have increased spending on nuclear, something that we were supposed to have been getting rid of instead of increasing. That would have been $1 trillion. And then all the money, instead of going to help de-ghettoize America and help with student free education or universal health care, of which Clinton opposed, that would have continued. All your predatory payday loans, your high interest rates on credit cards, all that would have increased. Debtor's prison would have increased. More African Americans, Latino, and people of color or poor whites would have ended up in prison who couldn't afford proper legal representation. The Trans-Pacific Partnership would have been gone through, where she would have said there were some modifications. There wouldn't have been anything that was fundamentally different. It would have absolutely destroyed American unions and all of our sovereignty. And also, she would have continued to support Saudi Arabia and Qatar and United Arab Emirates and Egypt, the people who gave her funds, grants, gifts to her foundation and her personally. that would have only increased. So terrorism would have continued. I just don't think that the average Democrat or the average corporate liberal has a full understanding of the consequences to what Hillary and Obama represented. Your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. You mentioned the labor unions. Obama had promised a card check to support the labor unions, and as soon as he got in, he again double-crossed the unions. Now, look at what happened when President Trump got in. He invited the union leaders to there, and it sounded like a love fest. The union leaders supported him. So he's doing many things that Obama promised to do for hope and change, but refused to do. And you're right. If the corporate Democrats really understood or wanted to win, they wouldn't have supported Hillary. But the fact is, all of the polls were correct in May and June. They all showed that Hillary was going to lose very heavily to Donald Trump, but that Bernie Madoff would have won. And the corporate Democrats said, we would rather lose the election with Hillary than win with Bernie, because Hillary's our person. Hillary's going to complete the Obama revolution. She will now open the gates even more to the health insurance ripoffs. She will support Wall Street and absolutely slam down on labor and slam down on really the people who are the Democratic constituency, and probably would have double-crossed them even more than Obama. So the question is, how is it that the the people who still vote Democrats, especially the women and the ethnic and racial minorities, how can they think that the Democratic Party is on their side? I think what the election has shown is that there really can't be any real progress for the economy until there is a party to replace the Democrats. I don't believe that it's reformable given the current leadership of Russia haters like George Soros and the neocons. And as long as the neocons in Wall Street control the Democratic Party and will not give it up, as long as you have people like Nancy Pelosi and the Blue Dog Democrats and Cory Booker and these people you're not going to be able to have a party that actually fights for labor or labor unions or women or minorities. And there has to be a point at which people can look at reality and not just all of the rhetoric and all of the sort of fake news that you get in alas, in the New York Times. It's just amazing when the fake news is accused of being RT when it's actually the New York Times, Washington Post, the far what has become the far right, posing as if it were the mainstream.
What do you make of the Madonna's acting as if she is now a reputable spokesperson for a feminist perspective, when what she's saying about blowing up a White House and go F you and all these vulgar statements to a worldwide audience, when all the feminists that I know, the feminists who I respect and the feminists who speak for women all over the whole world, the Angela Davises, the Doris Huerta, the Winona LaDuke, Kate Millett, Alice Walker, Marianne Williamson. There's so many that the Charlene Spretnik and Reverend Sally Bingham and Lynn Twist and Sister Joan Chichester and Susan Sarandon and Daryl Hannah and Daisy Kahn and Lisa Sharon Harper, women who can articulate what it means to be a woman under duress, what it means to honor women's rights, but also are honoring the rights of women in countries that don't have those rights, who they're not there just as a photo op, just when there's a lot of people and you can take the stage and act like you're really one of the people, but all the rest of the time you're in private jets and private parties and making money, and you don't have a thing to do with the women's movement. And so there's Hillary acting as if she's the new leader of the feminist movement, and feminists giving her that credit when look at what she and her husband did to the minority population. Look at how bad Black and Latino and poor white women had it under Hillary and Bill Clinton's co-presidency. Take us through that, and then look around the world where people are marching here, but where were they for the last 8 years? Where were they when the gays were being thrown off buildings and killed and beheaded in Saudi Arabia? Where was the protest? Where were the demonstrations for the Saudi embassy? Where was the protest in front of the Egyptian embassy with the Muslim Brotherhood when they were in power and we were doing business with Egypt? Where were they protesting when women in Qatar and United Arab Emirates and Kuwait were also being repressed? I just find that there's a hypocrisy. And then you get the Michael Moores and others, and even the so-called new Democratic wing of the Democratic Party by the Young Turks, and it's still a corporate philosophy. It's still, they represent the 1%, like it or not, because they are in the 1%. And I just feel that the people who are grabbing the microphones, the people who are rushing out there to get themselves on camera, don't represent true change and haven't been there for the people who suffer. I haven't seen them in Syrian refugee camps. I haven't seen them in a lot of places on a consistent basis. Those are my personal thoughts. I'd like to hear yours.
Well, I think you're quite right that the Women's March the day after the inauguration was hijacked. And the problem is that groups like Move On, that's funded by George Soros, and its allied movements have basically taken over the leadership, shoving out any leadership that isn't in the 1%, the top 1%. So you have the National Association of Women, headed by a billionaire in the Wall Street 1%. The same thing for the LGBTQ, headed by 1%. So it's basically all of these identity politics have been hijacked really by Wall Street. So it really is the Women's March for Wall Street, the Women's March for war with Russia, the LGBTs for Wall Street. And they're letting themselves be manipulated, and people will say, well, you know, we will divide you into these various identity groups, but there's one identity that we're going to have to throw you out if you have that identity. There's one thing we will not tolerate. You cannot be a member of the working class. If you're a woman in the working class, get out of the women's movement. If you are an LGBTQ, but you have to work for a living, get out of our movement because we're the Democrats. We don't want you here. So I think that basically the women, the LGBTQ, these identity people should say, unless, the most important thing above all is, number one, we want the earth to survive without atomic war with Russia. Number two, we all want jobs. It's true we want equality. It's true we want these rights. But if you're going to say that you're pro-war, you're against peace, you're against the anti-war movement, and you're against labor, and you're not going to promote jobs, and you're for Wall Street and for untaxing the 1% and shifting the taxes on to the 99%, then we're not going to march under your banner, even if you say you get it'll be Women for Wall Street. Look, women, come along. We're going to say no. As long as you're a part of our group, you can't be a part of it. They're going to have to get rid of these people that do have a lot of funding, that do have a lot of money, and they're going to have to say, if the price of your money is to support right-wing policies, then that's going to discredit us in the women's movement. That's going to discredit us in the LGBTQ. That's going to discredit us anti-war people. So we're not going to let ourselves be taken over by Move On, by Soros, and by the people who have wrecked the Democratic Party and have turned the country over to Donald Trump, because awful as he is, he's not as awful as Hillary.
And that was what surprised me, is that people who were rightly angered by Donald Trump and his rhetoric and his posturing, his immaturity, and people should protest what they find offensive. But at the same time, where were they protesting in the last 8 years when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, but mainly Hillary Clinton, were destroying Libya and destroying Syria and creating a coup in Honduras and the Ukraine, and undermining any regime in the world that did not support our neoliberal and hegemonic concept of globalization? Where were the protests about the poor? And where I didn't see a single protest in America, not a single protest for 20 million people being thrown out of their homes. Now, that's something to protest, where you got 16 million hungry children going to bed each day. That's worth protesting, because their children, the people who had these movements and the celebrities, their children are not starving. And if your children are not starving, and if you don't have to worry about your next paycheck, then your perspective is not the same. And I just find there's just blatant hypocrisy. Barack Obama, and I just played a clip yesterday, Barack Obama deported more people out of the United States, including putting more under arrest in ICE prisons than all the other presidents combined in the 20th century. Not a word about it. Not a word. Seeing that all these bankers took the money and then created derivatives. Right now, 4 banks are holding $460 trillion in derivatives. The average person doesn't even know what a derivative is, and yet if those go toxic, we're held accountable. And so I think that we have been misled and misdirected by people who are opportunists, and the good people, and I believe most people are good people when they join a movement, but they're following the leaders. And I don't trust these leaders. I don't believe in them. And they haven't been around when the rest of us have been there night and day for decades. They show up at an opportune time, grandstand, and then they're gone. And yet, where do we go from there? Another area, Michael, would you take us into Europe? Now, I know, and I'm not breaking any confidences, because you've also stated it, you have counseled many governments. You are so respected that the Chinese gave you multiple professorships, and you counseled with the leaders there in Iceland and other countries. And yet some of these countries are realigning their economic policies. They're changing the way that they are looking at the economy now and the future to make it more sustainable. Could you give us examples of what we as Americans should know about how other people who've been in crisis are rearranging their priorities, what they're doing, so we can also bring those into some of our movements?
Well, I'm not sure how much they're rearranging them. Europe is in really bad condition, and under the way that the euro is organized, they're not able to run budget deficits. They don't have a government. The condition of joining the euro is you do not run a deficit to increase employment. In fact, in order to balance the budget, under terms that give more and more money to the upper 1%, you have to cut back social spending, and the result is a sharply decline in living standards in Europe. I just got back from England a little while ago. It's going down very sharply. That's why you're going to have elections in France this month and next, where Marine Le Pen is running on a policy of withdrawing from the euro. The North Italians are talking about withdrawing from the euro. Greece is in crisis. I spent quite a bit of time there, and they're just being strangled. Essentially, Europe is being treated like a third world country. Even Iceland is not really recovered because the banks have an enormous amount of currency that so far they're not able to move out of the country. But if they ever try to convert their money and their takings into foreign currency, the Icelandic kroner will fall. So things are not good at all in Europe. They're not good in India because of the endemic corruption there. And the experiment to get rid of cash. So China is really the only country that seems to be growing, because that's the only country that's really following the policies that made the United States so strong. That you have a mixed economy of the government and the rest of the economy, and the government spending and guidance is, and the fact that the government is the main creditor means, despite the fact that they have debt problems, the government as creditor can always forgive the debt. And nobody will complain because they're not taking money out of the hands of bankers. Now, Obama could not simply say, okay, people can't afford to repay the mortgage debt, we'll write them down, because if he would have done that, then Citibank would have lost, and Chase Manhattan would have lost, and Wells Fargo would have lost, and that's his constituency. But China doesn't have an independent bank constituency, so they don't have the pressure for the right that's happening. What President Trump is doing here is doing to the U.S. economy what we did to Russia in 1990, essentially wiping out the role of the government to act as a balancing force and a mediator. So, Trump is simply doing what Obama's Trans-Pacific policy called for. Essentially corporatizing the economy and removing the ability of government to regulate it. All this is in Obama's policy. So that's why, I think you should look at what Trump is doing now is the third term of Obama. Trump is Obama's legacy. And it's not good for America. It's not good for Europe. But in Europe, they think, well, nothing can be done legally under the Constitution until we withdraw from the euro and break up the European community. Just as Britain is leaving, you'll have France, Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, all leave, and you'll have to re-put it together again. That's why the Democrats are trying to distract attention and saying, don't look at your problems here in America, look at Russia. Always blame the enemy. That's what Hitler did in Germany to distract people in the 1930s, and it's exactly the playbook that both the Democrats and the Republicans are doing here in America.
There's a Spanish proverb that says, "Since I wronged you, I have never liked you."
Yep.
And I see that with Russia. Russia is not going to invade the United States. It does not represent either real or existential threat. And this is all distraction. Michael, my final question for you is this. When you look at what's happening in America today, with at least 260 million, or two-thirds of the population, nothing has been getting better for a long time. Looking at what Trump is doing now, as you said, he is the legacy of Obama, and he's the third term of Obama. What do you see the likely outcome? I realize this is a hypothesis, but a likely outcome as far as our economies, as far as the value of our dollar and standard of living over the next 4 years?
Well, the economy will continue to go down because people are so much in debt that there's no way there can be a recovery, no way that jobs can recover until the debts that people have are written down. I don't see the health insurance payments going down. I think people's overhead is going to go up, and that's going to squeeze them. And after they meet the monthly nut of paying for their housing, paying the bank, paying the utilities, they're going to have even less to spend on goods and services, and that's not good for employment. It means that the new jobs that are created are going to continue to be part-time jobs, most of them at minimum wage. That's not good. So living standards are not going to go up. The dollar may go up because when people get poor, they import more, and that may actually strengthen the dollar. Adam Smith said that often interest rates are lowest in countries seem more prosperous in countries going fastest to ruin. And we may have low interest rates. We may have the appearance of a strong dollar, but that's because nobody can afford to buy imports, just as the sign of Greek. So if you want to see where we're going, take a look at what's happened to Greece when you had the equivalent of the Obama-Hillary program imposed by the International Monetary Fund on it. Look at what is happening in France, and look at what's happening in Spain. I look to Europe as how we can go down, be squeezed into a slow crash, slower and slower, and what the government will try to do, or what the 1% will try to do, whether they're Republican or Democrat, will try to blame the foreigner. They'll find some foreigner to blame, they'll find some enemy to blame, but they won't blame themselves, and they won't blame Wall Street, and they won't blame the insurance monopolies or other monopolies. It's all basically an exercise in deception and distraction of attention, and people no longer have a real newspaper to read that'll give them this. That's why your show is so valuable, because you're able to talk about what we're talking about today, and this just doesn't get discussed in the mainstream press.
Well, Michael, I thank you very much for your insights. As always, you give us a lot to think about. Professor Michael Hudson, my guest. I'm Gary Null. You're listening to the Progressive Commentary Hour.